Hello, welcome to the September 2nd, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply type your question in the chat field or send a question in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, it's always helpful if you could specify which version of Cubase or the Steinberg product that you're using. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 12, 13, or 14. In addition, which operating system, that information is often helpful. We should have an index of all of the topics discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. And when asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner I may get behind depending on the number of questions. So if you don't see an immediate response to your questions, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. If you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a great site. There's over 41,000 topics that you could search through. We have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They do this out of the kind of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community experience. And we'll also give Jazz Dude special extra credit for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a great resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and let us know where you're from. Let me clear my throat right quick. All right. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a question from Songs of the Ivy Brothers. It says, while in a Cubase Artist 14 session, how do you delete saved FX chain presets? All right, so let's say if I come over and we have an FX chain preset here. All right, so if I have, we'll just load another. All right, so if we want to save this as an FX chain preset, so we'll just right click on our inserts tab and we'll say save FX chain preset. So as soon as I come over here, we'll call this Ivy Brothers. Okay, so now when we want to access that particular FX chain preset, we could come right over here and go to Media. We will go to User Presets. We'll see FX Chain Presets. And then right here, we'll see Ivy Brothers. All right, so if I wanted to place that FX Chain preset on a different track, we can now see that these would have the same effects. But when we want to delete it, all you'd have to do is, so again, to access it, we'll just come right over here from the home. We'll go to User Presets, FX Chain Presets. Then we could just simply right click on our FX Chain preset. We'll say Reveal in Finder or Explorer if you're on Windows. And then we could just come right over here, hit the delete key on your computer. So select that particular file. And we could just come right over here and move that preset to the trash, and we see that it is then gone from your system. So if you want to again come over, go to your media bay, user presets, FX chain presets, and when you see the preset that you want to get rid of, right click on it, reveal in Finder, and then you can move it to your trash or to your recycling bin depending upon your operating system, and then it won't show up. All right, so we see Stefan joining from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. Dwight Cunningham's checking in from the Bahamas. Says, Greg, what interface or mixing console would you recommend as regards to inserting hardware into Cubase 14 Pro? So generally, if you're dealing with external effects or instruments, you just probably want to have access to as many I/O options as, like, the quantity of I/O is always really good. Now, sometimes you may have a mixer and you go, okay, great, I have 16 inputs, but if it's a mixer that is an audio interface, you have to figure out if those are 16 discrete inputs, like independent inputs, or it's 16 inputs that get kind of summed down to a stereo input. So you want something with lots of discrete independent inputs and outputs. My friend Michael Wagner, when he had his studio, he had 2 MIDI cards, and he ran a lot of external processing gear. And he had 2 MIDI cards, and he had one MIDI, so you could do 64 channels of I/O. So he had one that was dedicated for 64 channels of I/O for outboard gear, and one that was dedicated for tracking and mixing purposes. So at that point, so you had 64 ins and outs. Most people, so if you have 4 pieces of outboard gear, and let's say they're, a combination of mono or stereo processing, so let's say if you have 4 pieces of outboard gear, or an external instrument that you wanted to utilize, think of for every source probably having 2 ins, 2 outs. Some devices, like if it's a monophonic compressor or EQ or channel strip, you could often do 1 input and 1 output. But most people that are doing different external effects integration are going to be utilizing, a lot of analog ins and outs. Sometimes if your audio interface has an ADAT connection, you could also get a ADAT converter, like a box that just does conversion, analog conversion, like an 8 in, 8 out that goes to like an ADAT toslink connector. And that could give you 8 inputs and 8 outputs at 48K. If you're doing 96K, you get 4 ins and 4 outs. And people will expand to get little almost converters that go into an ADAT light pipe so that you could have more connections. So if you think that you may want to grow, it's always good to get an audio interface that has an ADAT expansion port or 2. And that way gives you a lot of flexibility for kind of increasing I/O in a modular way. All right, we see Radar the Band, Randy checking in from Dallas, Fort Worth, sending a big woohoo. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index. I know you had missed some of the live streams last week on a business trip, so it's great to see you back, Jan. We missed having you. All right, we see Uno Memento checking in from Finland. We see Jazz Dude on. We have Terry Gray joining from Minneapolis. Great to see you on. We have Martin from Germany. We see Val as Y42 joining from Vienna. We have Paul Grooveside just saying hi, Greg. All right, we have Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and other pets like Mark Raven's dog Stella. All right, we see Benny from Sweden. We have Jack Bauer joining from New York City. Thanks for being on. All right, Paul Grooveside says, please, can you tell me how to add metadata to exports in Cubase, or will that facility be added to future updates? Okay, so, it depends which metadata that you want. So if we have markers in a track, if we want to incorporate the timing information, so let's say we go to your file to export audio mix down. At this point, we can put in your broadcast trunk, so we could come over here, we could insert marker. We could also do IXML, so that could be stuff like your actual and if you want to also, so that could be like author's name, so if you come over to your settings, to preferences, I think it's under general. If we select that, maybe it's not under personalization. So here you could have the author name and default company name that will be inserted as metadata. There's also, if if it's going to be there's all sorts of different types of metadata, but you could also just select a particular audio file. And let's say if you go into like the pool window, or I'm sorry, if we go to Media Bay, there, we could come over and I'll just, we'll get the right zone enabled here. So here we could see if I wanted to put, different metadata into like all my style, sub-style into any audio file, or if I wanted to come over and then we could click on the little sign here so we can see that there's a significant number of metadata fields that you could apply into particular files. Or if you wanted to make your own metadata field, you could do that. It may not be able to be read by different files, different programs, but you can do searches. So there's lots of different metadata options, as you can see here, that are already available, but you could do a lot of it already kind of in the pool as well. So let me know if you have a specific set of metadata that you're trying to incorporate. All right, and so we see Vince from Winnipeg joining us. He's going to be in the studio later today. All right, you see John Costigan says, sorry, he had to miss his Zoom. Says Zoom insists I need a license, but not always. So I think you could always, if you run into problems, just, send me a quick email, John. But generally you could always, just go to like the Zoom, even if you go to the Zoom website and just enter in the meeting number and the passcode, you should be able to get in as well. But yeah, reach out anytime if you can't get into. Okay, so we see from Val asks, last live stream I asked about rendering in place with effect sends but not following groups. I tried it out for a few times but it never worked. I always just transferred the send levels. All right, so let's say if we have this particular, so say if we come over here, I'm going to take this track. I'll turn that down to annoyingly loud. All right. All right, so I'm going to send this to a group. And let's say on the group track, we want to put like an annoying delay. Do something. Okay, so let's say if we want to do this. All right, so I want to put, let's say, a send effect that's a reverb on this particular channel. So generally when we do this, we may just have to bypass the group routing to separate it, because when we do like the groups and sends, so I thought you were asking for the opposite, but let's just give it a quick try here. So I'm going to add, let's say, let's to flanger. Okay, so now we have the flanger on the particular group. So let's say we want to render in place. All right, so I'm just going to temporarily switch this to my stereo out, and let's render in place. So when we do the complete signal path, that's going to include sends and the insert effects. So let me just... So now we'll do the render in place. All right, so let's listen to it here. So we don't have the delay that's on the group, but we have the flanger. So you may have to temporarily, because it doesn't distinguish between the group, it kind of treats the groups and sends as the same. But if you temporarily do the routing, at that point, it will not bypass the group effects. So now as soon as we render with the, if you want to just simply come over here and just change the routing before you export, you could do that as well to exclude the effects on the group channel. So let me know if that helps. But I think Cubase will see the sends, like the effects channels and the groups, as the same, and can't turn one on or off. All right, so we see Jason Sykes joining from South Yorkshire. All right. Just finding my spot. My chat field jumped to me. You see Val says maybe has a preference wrong. All right. We see Val's on a train going to rainy Vienna. All right. So we have Odugwu checking in, joining us from Nigeria today. We have Simone Obermuller joining from Austria. Thanks for being online. Welcome to the live stream. All right, Tony Trunzo just asks, is it possible to freeze all instruments in one step? So let's say if I have, I'll just duplicate this track here. All right, so all you have to do is, if you want to freeze multiple tracks at once, select those particular tracks. We will come over, and if you go to the project menu, you'll see, maybe it's the edit menu, sorry, freeze. So we can say freeze selected tracks. So now that I do that, we'll just come over. I don't have to do them individually, so I think that changed in 12 or 13. So now when we do this, both of these tracks are frozen. So when I go to move them, nothing happens with it because they are frozen. And then we could always just go back and from edit, and then we'll choose. So at this point we could, I think if we just say selected tracks. So now that they're frozen, we could unfreeze, and we could choose to delete the files. So just select the events or the tracks right here and go to edit, freeze, and you can do more than one track at a time just by choosing selected tracks. Okay, you see Millard Brown from Pennsylvania saying hello to me and to the Cubase family. Hope everyone is well and happy. Rishab Saxena says, when I copy and paste to channel Cubase, it copies all plugins, send levels, but it doesn't copy automation data or an LFO linked parameter. Is there a way to include those two? Okay, you see generally like automation is going to be on kind of tied to the track. So like on, like, tied to the timeline, I believe. So let's say if I come over here and so let's say if I if I copy, you know, the event here on the project window, that's where kind of the automation lives. It's kind of on the project window. We may see it reflected here, but when we're kind of just copying tracks, so let's say I have processing on this track and I want to copy, you know, so when we're doing this, we're kind of copying the track settings. So, but, you know, at this point, so if I come over, we could just say, let me just, I could just kind of take, so let's say if we want to, you know, copy the track. So when we copy the channel here, this is going to be copying just, you know, that one particular track. So let me just, all right, so I have this. So when I come over here, so we'll copy that. So this is the channel settings, but not necessarily the automation. So when we paste the settings, we can see that all of those plugins were automatically carried over, but the automation doesn't actually live in the mixer. The automation is actually in the project window. We see it reflected here, but when we're doing copying the channel, we're copying all the channel settings, but it's not necessarily the automation. So if you want to include the automation, you could just simply kind of come over here and say, okay, I want to take those automation points, copy, and then you could, you know, if you wanted to paste, you know, those to a different track, you know, you could also just, if you wanted to include automation, you could choose to just duplicate the particular track, and that would automatically carry over the automation. You could also, there's a macro to duplicate the event without data. So if we come over here, one of the macros, you'll see duplicate selected tracks without data. So you could, if you didn't want the particular part, you could do that. But when you copy in the mixer, that's going to be for the mixer settings. But the automation, you know, like we don't necessarily on the project window have access. You know, we don't see the EQ, the inserts. We see those as part of the mixer. So we could copy the data here and it's included because that's where the automation lives. But if I, you know, copy a part here to another track, you know, it's not going to necessarily copy all of the settings. So we could copy kind of what's resident on a track versus the mixer channel. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay. Thanks for the question, Rashab. All right, so we see from Jack Bauer, says, can you print MIDI from the pattern editor after using the note probability feature? Okay, so let's come over here. All right, so let's say if I'm here, let's get to our editor. Okay, so we'll come over here. Let me just solo this. All right, so as we take it out of loop, sorry. All right, and let's just put in like the most generic drum pattern of all time. All right, so let's say we want to adjust the probability. So if you're not familiar with the probability concept, we could just come over here and say, okay, I want the probability to be 42% that it will play like these particular notes. So the lower this is, so if I now drag this to my timeline, so we'll come over here to that particular track. Let's go ahead and convert it to MIDI. Okay, so now when we play this part here, let me just all right, so we can see that the play probability is carried over into the MIDI editor. So the play probability that was generated in the actual pattern editor is then carried directly over to the play probability in the MIDI editor. So those changes will automatically be reflected. So if I come over, let's just copy this, we will probably get different results on the play probability. So we listen to the hi-hats. So we can hear a difference. So the play probability that you do set in the pattern editor itself is carried over when the pattern is dropped into the project window. If you're not familiar with how to kind of do that, it's just taking this little icon here. We could drag that to the particular channel. So we could have kind of that pattern automatically carried, placed right there. And then when we convert it, so we can see our play probability here. When we convert that pattern to MIDI and we go into, we can see the play probability is automatically reflected there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, we see Michael Pierce. It says, evening all from a lightning struck changeable UK. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teen from Weatherford, Texas. All right, Jack Bourne says, just saying hey. All right, Roland Stuff says, hi Greg, I've just deactivated Cubase from an old PC I'm replacing. It shows it's been deactivated online, but still seems to work on old PC. I'm puzzled, thanks. So check the activation manager. It could be that maybe it hasn't phoned home yet, but check if you go to your activation manager on your particular on that local PC, you should have a Steinberg activation manager and just see if it's showing that it's activated there as well. But when I've deactivated stuff, I haven't had it work. But check locally on the machine versus your account. All right, so Christopher Lamont just says, how do you get Splice or TrackLib to show up in Cubase? So they don't show up directly in Cubase, but I think you could just have them open and drag and drop from, from their browsers directly into Cubase, but there's no like direct integration per se. All right, we see Michael Teams has granted Jazz Dude 1 gallon of chocolate mint ice cream. Okay. All right, so we see Pal joining from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. We see Rick France from the Pacific Northwest. And John Costigan's received 1 gallon of butter pecan ice cream. All right, so we see Songs from the Ivy Brothers. Says, why did Artist 11 have the tempo detection option, but Artist 14 does not? I will check. So I noticed today, I was looking at a Cubase Artist for something. I noticed that the tempo detection wasn't in there, so I'm not sure if it was in version 11, in Cubase Artist version 11. I'll make a note to kind of check to see if it was in version 11, and if it was in 11, I'll bring it to the attention of Steinberg. All right, so we see from John Raham says, when adding points to the tempo track with the pencil tool, how to ensure they snap to grid. Normal snap doesn't seem to do it. All right. All right, so I'm just going to place my snap on here. All right, and let's just set our snap here to bar. So all right, so say we want this to, tempo changes can occur at any point. So let's say if I come here, we can see that we could automatically, let me just, so let's see if we could get it to snap. So, it's important to be able to have the tempo changes go. Let's see if I put that value in. So it didn't quite snap. Let me just. All right, and let me just see if there's like a modifier key. Like as we go to move the event, you could see the exact position, but it doesn't seem to snap. I can see where it can make sense to have that snap, but where you don't want to be limited to that. Just try. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's immediately snapping as you'd expect. I understand the desire to want it to be. You could always just simply go to the info line here and just say, okay, I want to go to like 13.1 and manually set it from the info line. But it seems like maybe like a modifier key that it should be set to, you know, I can see the desire to want it to snap to the grid so that the tempo change occurs right there. And I think also now might be like a keyboard shortcut. So let's just see. So you could, if you move the cursor right there, you could also just insert tempo event at cursor. So if you move like the snap, so let me program that to my MIDI remote here quickly. And we can show maybe a different workflow with that. So I want this button. So now as let's say if I'm snapping to my grid here, all right, so let's say we have this set to whole notes. So let's say as we nudge, I could just insert the tempo right at the bar line. So if I just hold down the command and the plus sign, we could nudge and then just insert. So at that point you could say, okay, now I just want it to nudge to enter in certain values that are perfectly tied to the grid. So let's say if I come here, let's put that at 0. So now I nudge and insert the tempo 108, boom. And then that will be, so you could enter it in, snap to the grid as well. So, but I'll bring that to their attention. All right. All right, so we have MGLax or MGLax 35. Can you show how comping works? Yeah. Okay, so let's say I've recorded multiple passes. So I just maybe put this into like a cycle. All right, so let's say this is take 1, take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so now if you want to create kind of a take or comp between these, so we have a dedicated comping tool. So when I come over here, I could just select, just clicking will select this recording, this take. So now if I wanted to take different sections from different parts, I could just kind of come right over here, and then we could choose different sections. So say, okay, I want to do this take. Now if I was unsure of a take, what I could do is just hold down my control or command key and say, oh, maybe I want this one instead. And we could now just kind of come over and say, okay. So now that I've kind of found the parts that I like, we could close the lanes. So each take is going to be recorded onto its own lane. And now I'm only seeing the parts that I chose from the different takes. So once you have your multiple takes, so I just recorded this in the cycle, so I could switch between my different performances here, or just kind of swipe and say, so maybe I want to do this take for this section. So instead of having to split, select, mute events, the comp tool kind of does all those things at once. And then if you wanted to kind of resize the comp, I want to start just a little bit later, you can just kind of come over and just select. So this one tool can select the different parts. We could audition. We could also slip the audio. So if you hold down Command plus Option or Alt plus Control, you can slip the contents within that particular take as well to get different ideas. So that's how you could do some comping in Cubase. Let me know if that's helpful for you. See, Michael Pierce has been granted 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge. Sounds like a good flavor. And Michael Pierce agrees it's a great flavor. John Koskian just says, thanks for the Zoom tip, Greg. Yeah, and if you wanted to practice before the next Zoom social meetup, just email me and we could do a trial run to make sure you can get on. All right, Randy from Radar the Band has gotten 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream. See, Val just says, okay, thanks, Greg. I never used the says I never routed to the stereo out before. That's what I missed. Yeah. All right, so all right, so Paul Grooveside's question says, thanks, Greg. I was particularly thinking of including metadata of track title, artist name, release name, tempo, web address, and notes for tracks to be released. Is that possible, please? All right, so let's take a look at, so I'm not sure if I think most of those would be metadata that could be accessed. So let's go over here to the media bay. All right, so here you see, album name, rating, family name. So if you're going to do album, track title, let me just go through it. So artist name. So if I wanted to come over here, I think there's. So if you go to staff, say here you get author, company, artist, tempo. So I'm not sure if the web address, we could always just, let's see if it's, but if you, so the web address, we could come over here and just say we want it to be text. We want it to be displayed as web address or web link. So as soon as we do this, we'll say, okay, we'll have that as text. Let's put So you can see if you're doing staff, we could just say, okay, let's put the artist name in there. So now when we come back over here, we can say your web address. You can say, you know, clubcubase.com, whatever. And you can see the, so we should see the, yeah, so if you look at the artist name, you could put that in, and notes for tracks to be released. So I'm not sure if notes are generally in metadata. So I know that if we take, we could take the notepad data. There may be like a limitation to characters on metadata, but let's just see. Let's try notes one more time. Maybe notes are already in there. Yep, so there are notes under audio assets. So let's say if we put that in, let's see if there's a limitation on characters. You know, so you could have all of those as metadata. You know, you could also, so I'm not sure if other programs are going to be extracting that, but if we have like notes within the particular project as well, so yeah, you do have a project notepad. So if we come here, you could have a notepad on each particular track. So we come over here, I use, you know, U87 mic up close. All right, and then if we go to like our project notepad, we can say cool track recorded at my Abbey Road. So, and so we could see, you could have track notepads. This may not be included as metadata, but if you wanted to come over, we could just say, when we go to export, we could say, let's export our notepad data. And this way we could just say, we could have, okay, you know, the different notes for the session as well as all your track notes can be included, but it's not necessarily metadata within the particular audio file, but you could have notes within the metadata there. So play around with that. Let's see, Val just says, I got to maybe make a shortcut to route to stereo out, render, and route back to the previous set channel. Got to play around a bit. So, yeah, you can make a macro, do that. All right, so Paul Grooveside just letting us know he's in Manchester in the UK. Thanks for letting us know. It's always good for me to envision where people are at. All right. Brightman Studios is just saying, everyone rock on to all the Michaels in the house. Michael Pierce, Michael Teams, and that his middle name is Michael. So that's good to know. There'll be a trivia question later. All right, so we see Ted Springman. Great to see you on. It says, hi, Greg. I'm planning on using macros heavily in my workflow. Am I correct in assuming that macros are either active or not, and different ones can share the same key? So as long as one is active, Thanks. So, you may not see macros. If you don't see a macro that's visible here, like we see that this one is grayed out because, your macro can contain any order of particular functions. And so it just says, so they could share. So I'm not sure when you share the same key as in like a keyboard shortcut. So every function would need to have a unique keyboard shortcut. So when we come over here to key commands, if I say, okay, I want to export a PDF and I just say, command P, we'll get a message saying that this is already used for open pool, and you could reassign it. So if you want to have one keyboard shortcut that does multiple functions, we used to be able to do it in the past, and that would kind of throw people off when they would, delete a file and try to cut it at the same time. So some different things like that. So now it's going to be one unique key command. But if you have something like a Stream Deck, you could use a Stream Deck and have MIDI remote automatically kind of trigger multiple commands very easily that way. So if you could specify that, Ted, or clarify it for me so I could understand better, I could probably answer you a little more accurately. All right. All right, inactive user asks, hi Greg in chat, how are you today? So I'm doing great, thanks for asking. My question is, if I want to render my reverb, but my audio clip isn't long enough to render the reverb tail, how can I make an audio clip file longer, for example? Okay. Okay, so let's say I want to put let's say I want to render this bass with a delay. All right, so I'll just do it as a send here. So say I want to include that. So when we go, let's say if we come over here to render in place. So I'm going to take my render settings, and then we have a tail size. So I can say, okay, I just want to put like 4 seconds of a tail on this. I'm going to do my complete signal path so that my delay is included. So now I'm going to take this particular file, and we'll see that now when I come over here. So let's render that one more time without having it armed. Okay, so now come over here. Now we have our delay. So I'll just mute this. And I'll just so that way we could just simply apply. So if you go to render in place again, so let's say we take this file, we go to render in place, and it's already been rendered, but you'll see the option just for adding tail mode. So you can put it in seconds, bars and beats, and have that automatically have those effects automatically included to make the audio clip longer. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, always wonderful to see Sable Winters on from Bay Area, California. All right, so we see from Marco Chenko says, hi, it's Chenko from Toronto. Cubase Pro, is there a way to extract music score tabs from an audio file? So we could do, like let's say if I want to do this particular bass here. So if it's a monophonic source, we could do it. So say I come here. So what I want to do now is go into, I'm going to double click on the audio file, go into Very Audio. We'll edit the Very Audio. And as we come over here, all right, so at this point, now that we're in our Very Audio editor, so we double click, we can see all of our inspector tabs here. We could just choose, we'll see a function, and then we'll say extract MIDI. So I'm going to come right over here. So we could listen to, and I'm going to call this and let me just change my display. So I'm going to go into my MIDI settings here. So it's going to do it for monophonic sources. It's not going to do it for like chords from a piano, a guitar, or like a Fender Rhodes. But as soon as I come over here, let's get to my instrument settings and let's just see if we could. I'll change this to, let's say, so we'll come over here, let's make it into fretted instruments. We'll say so now when we go back to listen to it, we can see that's done a good job on the orchestration here, so or on the transcription of it. So we'll unsolo this. And let's say I'm probably maybe in, let's say the key of F sharp. So we will come over. So, but if it's going, now if you want to figure out what the chords are for like a polyphonic instrument, we could do that just by coming over, let me just, find one project here. All right, I'll just open one up here quickly. So it's not going to do like a direct translation of guitar, and nothing really does that like incredibly well. So let's say, but if I drag the guitar part here to the chord track, it will automatically make the chords. So then you could just simply do that, but it's not going to take the parts from a guitar or like a multi like playing chords, two or more voices, and convert that into MIDI. All right, Michael Teams is granted Sable 1 gallon of spiced pumpkin latte. So now that we're in meteorological fall season in the northern hemisphere, we'll see pumpkin lattes prevail through Thanksgiving here. All right. All right, so we see a question from Val. What can I do to have my global workspaces saved? Are they in the user profile file? So the global workspaces, so we have a project workspace that's going to be saved within the particular project. But global workspaces, if you go, are included when you go to the profile manager. So that's one of the things that is included with the profile manager is just the particular global workspaces. So those could be used in any on any project, as opposed to being project-specific workspaces. So those are included within the profile manager to be transferred from one computer to another. Okay, so we see from inactive user, how can I use the Cubase audio segment detection on vocals? Okay, so let's say I want to come over here. So you may, depending on what kind of mode you're in. So let's say if I want to come over here, this is a preference. So let's say we'll go over here to your preferences or settings, and we'll go to your tool modifiers. And we'll say for our select tool, so here, and you could see, I think it's just going to be the Command plus Shift key here. So, so you could change it. So as I hover over a particular word, I could now just kind of, bring, so this way I could select that particular word and just bring down the volume of that word just like that. So we can now just kind of come over, hover, and select different word phrases and be able to have that say, okay, I want this to be softer or louder. So I'm just holding down Command and Shift, and but you may have to go to your preferences or settings, to editing to tool modifiers, and when we come over here, let's see if it's for the range tool as well. So it might be under the range tool. Just set the audio segment editing, set your modifiers there, and then as you're in the range tool, you could just kind of hover and say, oh, that word needs to be louder or softer. And you could just kind of navigate through your different segments right there. It's a great feature. I think it was added in 1402. All right, Jose asks, in Cubase Pro 14, is there a way to add samples, instrument programs, or MIDI patterns to favorites and organize them into folders? So, these files can kind of reside anywhere, and so that Cubase could find that, on any other project. We don't necessarily put them into a folder, but what you could do is we come over to your media bay. So let's say, okay, I'm here. I want to go to my track presets, my audio presets here. So we could just kind of come over. And let me just see if we have. So we can see like ratings here. So we could assign different ratings to different items. So let's say, okay, these are my ratings. And then let me just, so at this point we can say, okay, I want to see, we could actually search. Let me just see if we, if we, I'll just show it in the big media bay here. You could do it in there, but it could be a little harder to find. But here we can see ratings. So I can say, okay, I want my user content. So I want my user content that is 5 stars. User content that is 4 stars. So we could just kind of come over here. So place, kind of do the rating. And then from the rating itself, you could kind of just, instead of placing it into a folder, because Cubase needs to kind of know where to look for your particular presets. And if that folder disappears and your preset is being used in a particular song, that can make it tricky. But if you're just doing it to find things faster, again, just kind of come over to, let's say, and use kind of the ratings here, and then you could just, customize, let's see, kind of by the particular rating system. So if we just see if it's, I don't think it's, okay, so if we choose rating here, so now we could say, okay, I want only my 4-star or only my 5-star. Then, so you could just kind of choose your ratings. So make it, just as you have your favorite stuff, give it 5 stars. And then you don't necessarily have to put it into a folder. You can just say, look for my 5-star rating presets. Right. Okay, so Val's asking, how can I record gunshots? I have a session on Friday to record different guns at a shooting range, but I'm worrying about clipping or ruining the mic choice. So I think I remember an ad, and this was when I was much younger, of AKG used to actually advertise a C414 if you're in Europe, or C414 if you're an American, but a 414 microphone next to a gunshot, implying that the sound pressure levels were fine for on that microphone for gunshots. So a lot of people were always very adamant, like putting it directly on a snare or kick drum. That would be too much sound pressure. So to kind of, as a marketing campaign, I remember AKG specifically, showing like a gunshot picture with an AKG, with an AKG 414 mic. So I think a lot of mics can handle the sound pressure level. I would measure it just to kind of, you might not have to be super close. If you're recording gunshots, there's probably not a lot of subtlety. I would record everything at 32-bit floating point, because if you get to the point where, let's say if we have this point and like the recording is kind of looking like that because the converter was, too wigged out, you could just bring the clip gain down. And if it's recorded in 32-bit floating point, you could bring it down to where the actual files aren't being kind of truncated off and just kind of cut off. But this way you could just, and you might have to bring the clip gain way down. But if it's recorded at 32-bit floating point, you could just decrease the clip gain until you see kind of the typical waveforms that aren't getting chopped at the top or the bottom. So a lot of people may choose dynamic microphones. One, if you lost a SM57 versus a a Neumann U87. It's a lot easier to take if for some reason the microphone reacted to sound pressure levels. But definitely record in 32-bit float. So when you're at this session, if you go to your project setup, which you could do from the project menu, just make sure that you're in, that your bit depth is actually at 32-bit float, because then you can't really clip the audio recording. You could just simply bring the gain level down. Yeah, well, it sounds like a fun project. I used to have friends that used to do a lot of work with electronic arts, and like those guys would always be recording, like one of their sound designers I knew spent like 3 weeks getting the Tiger Woods golf ball sound hitting a pond, like when you hit it into a pond, to get that sound perfect. And they actually hired Tiger Woods and paid him to hit balls into a pond. And I think he ended up just using he just chucked a golf ball in his pool in his backyard, and that was the sound he used after spending exorbitant amounts of money to get that correct. So try I would err on the side of maybe a dynamic mic and or 32-bit floating recording, even if you have 24-bit converters. All right, so we have Timothy, just says regards from Poland, says Cubase for life. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you on. All right, so Tony Trunzo is asking, Greg, is it possible to select all active instruments in a project using the project logical editor? So I'm not sure if you want to do the instruments or the parts, but let's say if we had parts here, so let's say we have a project here, so this is going out to an instrument. I'm going to add an instrument track with no data on it. So let's add, let's say, pad shop track here. All right, and I'm going to duplicate this track so we have some data on it. So let's say I want to select all tracks, all instrument tracks that have data on them. Okay, so let's come over to our project logical editor. We will say we want to select, I will say container type is track, media type, we may not have to do this, but we'll say MIDI. And I think we go to property, we could say property is set to let's see if we could. Okay, so property is not set to is empty. All right, so let's see if this. So now when we do this, the pad shop track, which has nothing on it, no events, is not selected. So if you wanted to freeze all of your tracks that currently have data, you could select it. And then if you wanted to, as a post process, we'll just say freeze selected tracks. So now let's say I have this track selected. I will come over and so we have, and I'll duplicate I'll add another instrument track here. Okay, so we see that instrument track is selected, no data on it. But now I want to select tracks that are not empty, that are MIDI, and freeze them. So I come right over here. we'll say, and then when we freeze, we could add tail size if we wanted to include like the delays like we showed earlier. And then we'll just come here, freeze those tracks. So we saw that those tracks that had data that were MIDI are selected, and now we're going to just simply freeze those selected tracks. So as I go to move data here, it will not move for us because it's frozen. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Go ahead, unfreeze the tracks. All right, wonderful to see Soren joining us. All right, we see from Learn with Steven, says, hi Greg, Cubase 14 Pro, can you help me change the expression keys for Halion, Sonic, Iconica, Sketch? I'd like to get them as high in my keyboard as I can for each instrument. So they may be fixed, but let's take a look. Like sometimes if you're doing a bass instrument, they'll be kind of higher. Will be above the instruments, and if it's a violin, you may not have it within the range of the particular instrument. Okay. So it looks like you can, all right, so let's say these are our key switches here. So as I would play back, so if I wanted this to be sustain, all right, so it looks like if we come over here, I could just click right here. So let's say our key switch now is at D0. So I want it to be, let's say, D5. Let's see if we could just switch that. Yep. So all you have to do is just kind of come right over here and just type in the key switch that you want for the particular articulation. So say C sharp 5. So double click and say C5. So now we could, when we switch, so just make sure it's out of the range of the particular instrument. But again, just kind of come over here, double click on the articulation slot, and then you could change what key is actually sending the particular key switch to change articulations. Thanks for the question, Stephen. All right. All right, so Val is just sharing a good point about the Splice question we had earlier. It says there is a VST3 called Splice Bridge inside a Splice that you can use on any kind of tracks to monitor the loops in the project tempo and root key. So thanks for letting me know. I don't have a Splice subscription or use it. All right, so we see Val's also mentioning, says if you have your Splice samples downloaded, you could also call them up with Media Bay, and that works with tempo and key as well. And Val's question is there a way to send the Splice, to send the Media Bay to the Q1 send? All right, so let's say, so if we're in Media Bay, so we'll come over, so let's just jump back here. Say, okay, we're in our loops. We are going through All right, so I'll just open up my control room in a separate window here. All right, so right now we can see that that when I go to preview a particular sound, just keep my control room open here. All right, so let me just check my connections, see if we. All right, so let's say we have so we have our connections here. So we have like drums, guitar, so when we look at this, we can see, okay, we have a reference mix, drums, guitar, cue. So when we want to preview, so if you want to send a preview, so this is going through the control room, but if we say, okay, I want to go to my drum, we could say, okay, I want this to not listen to the cue mix. So when we go to the cue mix itself, I could say, listen to what I'm hearing. And that cue mix, now the drummers in their cue mix is listening to the same things that the preview is listening to. So that's in the control room. So if they want it, let's say the drummer nailed his take and you want to just play him music in his headphones so that he doesn't interrupt people doing overdubs, you could send an external input. They could listen to their own cue mix or listen to the mix here. So I'm pretty sure, and I haven't tested this to confirm, but that if we now preview this, that the main mix that we're hearing here is being replicated into this particular cue mix. So when I just go to the cue mix here, just, instead of the cues or the external input, just switch it to mix, and then that way you could preview loops to have other people hear the preview of the loop for you. So give that a try, Val. Thanks for the question. Great art of the band says big screen and phone gong all at once. Cubase surround sound. See Michael Pierce sharing some on, I think, discussing the recording the mics. Says you're very unlikely to damage mics unless they're extremely close or in the direct direction of the shockwave capture off axis. You'll have to get there early to set up. Engage stage everything carefully before you get going. Some limiters might be handy if you got them. So. All right, wonderful to see Jim Hintz. Used to always come to my Club Cubase meetings at Washington Music. So wonderful to see you on, Jim. I hope you're well. I think speaking, I was talking to your son who works at API, the audio company, and he told me he moved down to Virginia Beach. I hope you're well. Jim has to get my most improved Club Cubase attendee award. He came in like just starting recording, and then within a couple of years he was doing Beach Boys sounding recordings and harmonies. So great to see you on, Jim. I hope you and your family are well. All right, so we see from Rebel how to make MIDI show as ghost note in Cubase. So if you have, ghost notes mean different things, but usually I think it's FL Studio terminology. Like if you don't want to see notes that have no, like we go to this pitch, there's no notes on E flat, let's say, in this, so I don't want to see the particular pitches. So if you want to hide notes that don't have any pitches, what you could do is just simply come over here. You'll see the pitch visibility. So I'm going to just simply turn pitch visibility on. There's two choices. One is to show pitches of the event, so we won't see any notes that don't have any particular events on the particular notes. So we only see notes that have the particular events. Or we could have them only within the particular scale. So let me know if that's kind of what you mean by the ghost notes, but if you go to the pitch visibility tab here, then you could choose between those two options there. All right. Okay. All right, so Ted Springman just says, my intuition is telling me Steinberg is close to a news release this week, perhaps. Am I just imagining things? So usually Steinberg's on a pretty regular schedule for releases. So I would probably make sure that, so if you kind of check the release dates, there may be some stuff going on tomorrow. So, check your... check your Steinberg, go to the Steinberg site tomorrow. There'll be some interesting things, but I don't think it'll be a new Cubase release. So. Okay. See Michael Pierce sharing recording tips for recording gunshots. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Okay, sorry, I'm back to where I was. Sorry. Okay, see more discussion on recording gunshots. Okay, Antoine Montmori asks, I have a question, please. Where is the MIDI Echo plugin of Cubase Pro 13? And can't find it after many research. All right, so let's go ahead and show you. So let's say we have okay, so I'll just load a quick preset here. Okay, so if we come over, and we'll see when we select the track, we'll see MIDI insert tab. So at this point, we're going to see MIDI echo here. So now when I play a single note, if I don't want the MIDI echo to change pitch, so just kind of, then I'll show just kind of hit one note. And if you want to change, the length, what type of delay, so let's say, okay, I want it to be dotted eighths. So you could just simply kind of come over here and change different aspects of it. But again, just go to, you'll see the inserts here. So when you look at the inspector, you might just scroll down, but you'll see MIDI inserts. If for some reason you don't see MIDI inserts, right click and click on setup sections and make sure that MIDI inserts is checked. And then when you look in here, these are all of the different MIDI plugins, one of which is the MIDI Echo. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. All right, Soren asks, hi Greg, when we play MIDI note and have input guided by scale so we can't hit the wrong note outside of this scale, is there a way to only have to play on white keys on keyboard? There is third-party tools for it. So when we do this, here we'll just okay. So it can actually just do it in kind of real time. So whatever keys you hit, if you just choose to hit all white keys, that will work. So let's say I'm here and have kind of our Wurlitzer. Okay, so let me set, so we could do it a couple of different ways. So one is if we have a chord track. All right, so we'll just add a quick chord track. Okay, and we put our, so let's say we want it to be in C sharp major. All right, and I'll just, okay, I'm going to come over here. Let's go to our chords, and we'll say follow, all right, so. Or I'll just do it within the editor here. Okay, so we can say, okay, we go to the scale assistant. All right, so we say we're in C sharp major. Okay, I'm going to use the editor scale here, and we'll snap the live input. All right, so now I'm only going to play notes on white keys. All right, so we'll go ahead and record. All right, so now when we look at what was actually recorded, all right, we can see I only played kind of notes that were in C sharp major, so now every note will automatically just follow the scales. So let's say if I change my chord here, I'll change it to B major, where C won't be the 7th in our scale. So again, come over here, we'll say, okay, let's put it into B major. So now as I record in, hitting only white keys, and I'll just do it with my all right, so now as we did this, we only hit white keys. We'll look at the notes that were inputted, and now everything is automatically in the key of B major for you. So you can, whatever notes you hit, it will automatically transpose to the editor scale or to the chord track if you have that set up for you. So you can hit all white keys. Okay. All right, so we see Antoine Montmori says, I'm still learning to use Cubase. It says it is a huge tool to help you create the sound of your dreams. I'm still learning Cubase too, so don't feel bad. It's kind of a lifetime of learning. Okay, let me just copy. I think we had a question about. Let me just put this into Google Translate here. All right, so we see it says, good evening. I'm wanting to connect my CMC QC controller with MacBook M2 Cubase 14. Can I do that? So I don't think that the MIDI drivers for those devices, because those were out in 2008, I don't think, and there's a kind of a whole new MIDI subsystem that was done with the M series processors. So I don't think that that is going to have MIDI drivers that are compatible, because Apple did kind of a change with the MIDI drivers. So I don't think that the CMC QC is going to natively work with your M2 Mac. I could dig mine out of a closet and just test it, but my inclination is that the MIDI drivers aren't going to be compatible because of changes that Apple did with the MIDI architecture and OS. All right. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer joining from Mission Viejo, California. All right, so we see Paul Grusai says, thanks, Greg, your demo of the metadata was very helpful indeed. You're a star. I'm just here to help people. So, but glad it was helpful for you. All right, we see Brian Sawyer joining us from Yuma, Arizona. Great to see you on the Zoom meetup. All right, we have Mark Winslow joining from Honolulu. It always sounds like a great place to be. Love Hawaii. All right, so we see inactive user says, okay, I didn't know about the tail size option. That's perfect. Thank you, Greg. So you're welcome. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see Antoine just joined the Discord group. It's great, a lot of wonderful information there. All right, so Chris Higginson says, hi Greg, Chris, London, UK. When my Mac goes into sleep mode on awakening, Cubase releases my audio interface and I have to restart. Can I remedy this? Many thanks with the SSL2 Plus interface. So one of the things that you could try, if you select the audio interface or select your audio system here, is maybe release driver when application is in background. On my MacBook, I have the Steinberg interfaces. When, I come back maybe after a day or two, like over a weekend, I may not turn on my work MacBook. And at that point, I may, I never have it not catch my UR242 is always available kind of when it wakes up. So it could be maybe There's settings with the SSL2 driver that does it, but it's probably not related to Cubase. Usually this particular preference or this setting, I come over here, is going to be, right here, like, so you could go back to a web browser, but you could try to do that, but it could very well be that it's kind of a setting with the SSL2 driver. Just out of curiosity, you could try to, leave it on a built-in audio driver and see if it still wakes up. Usually like on the Windows platform, you can, tell your USB ports not to go into hibernation mode or like a data economy mode or, something like that to save battery life. But you usually don't have those settings on Mac OS. So it could be, systemic to the particular audio interface, but mine always kind of boots right up after being asleep for a couple of days without issue. So okay, wonderful to see Altine Lee joining from Austria. Always want to go there. All right, you see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. It's great to see you on his Zoom social. All right. All right. See, Michael Pierce, soup recipes are being requested by Brian Sawyer. See, Val just saying so many Austrians today. Club Cubase, big in Austria, in Sweden, many other countries. All right. Yeah, and Terry Gray, who does a lot of audio post work, says if you record 32-bit files, you should have plenty of headroom for those gunshot sounds. Yeah. See, Michael Pierce says, he says, I got in a lot of trouble calling a 414, a 414, a 414. Yeah. It just says hash mark unified language. So, yeah. All right, so you see Val just saying about the gunshots, says, yeah, I thought 48K 32-bit float should be fine. So, yeah, that'll do the trick for you. All right. See, Terry Gray says he uses a sound devices recorder for his field work, great converters, and over his production. Yeah. Michael Team's also recommending a Sennheiser 421. They're pretty indestructible microphones. See, Val's just saying they want to make a database of different gunshots for trainees to train recognition of different guns. It's an interesting project. Yeah. It's probably the project you'll get paid for most in your audio career. So mine was cleaning up like business recording meetings for Donald King, the boxing promoter, his attorney. So. All right, so we see from 3 a.m. my free trial expired and Pro is too expensive. Do you have any discount codes? Ask me again on Friday. So. All right, Steve Green, his question is, hi Greg, I recorded an event at 118 BPM, tempo detected twice this. Is there a way of having a default tempo detection to the original BPM as a first resort? So if, let's say I I'm going to add an audio track here, and I'm going to set my tempo to 113 beats a minute. So let's come over here. We'll call this our tempo test. Okay, so as I come right over here, I'm going to just pop into record on this track. All right, so our tempo is now 113 beats a minute, as we see in our transport. When I stopped recording, we go to the pool, Control or Command plus the letter P, and now we're going to check what the tempo is. So as you record into Cubase, it's going to automatically have that tempo as metadata on the particular track. So right now we see it's 113 is what the tempo stamp is. So Cubase is already applying the tempo from the project as you hit record. So if you recorded at 118 beats per minute, you can just verify by going to your audio pool, by going to your audio menu, or I'm sorry, media menu to open pool window, and then you'll see the tempo value right there. So that will be the default setting for the tempo stamp of the particular audio file. Okay, so we have a question from Greg Busby. It says 2 cycle markers. First is longer than the second. Both end on the same measure. When I try to drag the end of the second marker, it always grabs the end of the first. How can I drag only the end of the second one? Okay, so let's add cycle marker here. Okay, so let's add a cycle marker. Okay, so I'm just going to come here. Let me just delete this. Okay, so we'll come here, let's add a cycle marker. All right, and let's add a cycle marker that's going to be shorter, that's underneath. Okay, so we have 2 cycle markers, both are on the same measure. When I try to drag the end of the cycle marker, it always grabs the end of the first. Okay, so the first is longer than the second, so we have cycle marker 2 is longer than this one, so when we try to grab, all right, so I'm just going to grab this, and let's see if, so if we kind of look down towards the bottom, so so I could see that we have, all right, so if I come here, I can move, so say, okay, so when I kind of select this particular marker, we could extend that. So this one is shorter than that one. You could probably also, if you just say, okay, I want to choose my start and end time. So let's say like these two are starting at the same time, but when I go to, I click on cycle marker 2, so we see that they're kind of, I could change kind of the end, but let's change maybe the start position of this particular marker. So let's say, okay, I want to go to marker 2 and its start position. We can now just kind of change from the info line. But if I select the shorter marker, I could just extend its, to change the length of the particular cycle marker by kind of just clicking at the bottom area here. So we have where we could choose kind of our bottom areas. So we see that this cycle marker is automatically reflected. Let me just reread and make sure. It says when I try to drag the end of the second marker, so maybe not try to drag the marker itself, but like the little marker flag here at the bottom. So it says when I try to drag the end of the second marker, it always grabs the end of the first. So try just, let me know if yours kind of looks like this, but now we could just simply kind of come over here and drag as needed pretty easily. All right, so we see from Steve Green, says, Greg, even with release driver, when application is background, I can't have YouTube and Cubase audio at the same time on a PC. Any thoughts? So, when you go to the release driver, when application is in background, that's not intended to have both of them playing at the same time. This is when we stop Cubase, we go to YouTube. Now YouTube will play. When we stop playing in YouTube, then we could have Cubase play. So if you have an audio interface, depending on your audio interface that you have, like my audio interface here, whether you're on Mac or PC, so I have the Steinberg UR24C, and it has a loop back function, so that I could just simply have my UR24C for Cubase. I would choose my DAW. And let's say I want my main system to be coming out of my streaming. So we have the same audio interface, same connections. I have a streaming music. So if we go to YouTube, let's just come over here. All right. So same connections. I have a streaming music. So if we go to YouTube, if I play over here, my audio, you hear audio. All right. So we hear YouTube. Same connections. I have a streaming music. And so the Cubase, I think you're both hearing those. If I play over here, my audio. I would create a weird time warp. But it's, so it's when you kind of go, the release driver in background is when you're kind of toggling back and forth, but not simultaneously. But if your audio interface is set up to kind of be like a multi, like with the UR24C, it works as like 3 different audio interfaces simultaneously. And that's a feature of the audio interface. So if your audio interface has a loopback function, you could probably do something like that. But it's going to be a limitation of the audio interface that's not allowing you to take 2 different driver architectures simultaneously. See, Michael Teams just, recommending the Sennheiser 421. Tony Trunzo says, thanks, Greg. That was most helpful. Lerner Steven says, excellent. Thank you, Greg. You're welcome. Glad it was helpful, and hopeful. All right, so we see from Val, it says, nice, Greg. That's a lot easier than rerouting inside of my audio interface. All right, so we have Reger joining us from Austria today. All right, and there's questions. One question: I have an iMac 2019 with i9, 64 gigs of RAM, use the latest Cubase 14 version. I recently automated the cutoff frequency of the underwater plugin on instrument track with the synth VST. The results in crackles sounds. Any idea where this could come from? All right, so let's put it on. I'll just switch my driver back so I could do my index later tonight. All right. Okay, so let's just okay, so I'm going to take this. Let's go to I think it's going to be under filter, underwater. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and just automate this. Make sure set a cutoff frequency. All right, just. Just maybe find something a little more full featured sonically here. Just put that underwater plugin on one more time. Just make sure. Just striping on the master. I'm not sure why I should be hearing it. So the one thing to check is, maybe it's just, if you're running into issues, I would try to see if when you go to the control panel for your audio interface to see if that is kind of, if you increase that, if you do get rid of the pops and clicks, so it could be just a buffer size. Also check if we go to your audio performance. Usually it doesn't take a lot of CPU power for that particular plugin to function. But you could see if there's any performance spikes. You should be fine, I would think, with an i9 processor. But there could be a chance that maybe you're just using too much CPU. You could also try to freeze the particular track and see if that makes a difference. But let me know if there's other things kind of going on, and see if if that is if that's the only thing that's going on in a particular track, or if it's in a already heavy kind of project with lots of processing on it. All right, you see, you mentioned ASIO guard's about 10%. Yeah, and once you're in, if you do have crackles, check just to go to your audio performance meter, and if you go to details, you should probably see the result. Let me just try putting it on a different project. I think that we would kind of hear it. It's usually not a subtle effect, so let's say if we, yeah, all right, so. So, but you know, see if when you do this, if you go to like your audio performance meter, and let's say we open up, you know, if I come over here, we can see that but it should kind of give you an idea if there's any audio dropouts, and a suggestion if it's like raised a buffer, or it just, you know, or to freeze a track, stuff like that. So, you know, check out, see if the audio performance is giving you any indications there. All right, Paul Claridge, great to see you on. Says Greg, my Cubase 14 Pro randomly lowers the stereo out fader on its own. I have moved all automation, and it is not activated on any channel. This happens on any project I have open. Any ideas? So check to see if it's, sometimes, you know, I would see if, you know, let me know if you're using a control surface of some kind, or if you have a MIDI controller connected. If you see that, sometimes what happens, I've seen like some MIDI controllers, like I had an older MIDI controller and one of the faders was bad, so it would occasionally send, like, you know, it would occasionally be transmitting messages even if nothing was going on. So, and it would be like the 8th fader, and in all fairness, I spilled some water in it. But I would notice that after spilling water in the fader, like a big dummy that I am, that fader, you know, would kind of be stuck. So if you're using a control surface, you know, even if it's like your keyboard, anything that's kind of routed as a MIDI remote, or a generic remote, or a Mackie control device, a Yukon device, see if you disconnect that, if that changes the behavior. So I was having the same exact things, and it was just that one fader would kind of stick, and then I would have to kind of unplug the controller, then it behaved as expected. But that one controller would be controlling the volume of a particular channel or the master fader, depending how it was configured. So take a look at that, Paul, and if you have controllers, see if you disconnect it, if that is making a difference overall for you. All right, so you see from Louis Che says, hello Greg, does Cubase do time alignment for drums to solve for phase issues with different multiple mics? All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here, let's just open up like a multi-mic drum set here. Okay, so let's look, we look at the phase, let's say, of our snare drums. All right, so you can see that our phase on our snare drums is slightly off here between bottom mic and top mic. So if we look at that, we can see that our phase isn't the best. So what we could do is say, okay, I want to take this mic. We have an audio alignment panel it's this icon here. You could also access it from the open audio alignment panel from the audio menu. I'm going to choose one as a source. Okay. All right, and then I want this as my destination. Okay, so again, and then let's say I want to, let's prefer time scaling. Let's align the audio. And now as we dial in, we'll take a look. So you could, experiment with the audio alignment there. Sometimes just even, if you could just select the particular event here. So let's say, okay, I want to do my snare top, snare bottom. You could also just come over here. You'll see invert phase or invert your polarity. You could try just inverting that. But also just quickly, just coming over here. And if you have, just changing, okay, I want this to, this snare to start ever so slightly after, I could just kind of come over to this particular event and move and slip the events visually. And that's one of the great things with the DAW is that you could just say, oh, I want this track slightly over, so we can take all your snap off, and then you could visually align stuff. So even that alignment compared to where it was, it's kind of very easy to do in a DAW, stuff that you wouldn't bother to do utilizing kind of a linear format like tape. So give that a try. All right, DaVinci Girl is just asking me if the project and master mix files for the Michael Teams album available if someone buys the Bandcamp albums. I'm not sure if it's the project files. Maybe Michael Teams could chime in. All right, so we have Woo Productions. Just sending greetings from Belgium. All right, we see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. Wonderful to see you on. All right, Steve Green, just a clarification. Says, hi Greg, my pool audio says 118 BPM, but tempo detection still decides on twice this. What setting do I need to get the tempo detection to match the pool tempo at first pass? All right, so let's say if you have an audio recording, all right, so let's say we have an audio recording here. Just turn it down. All right, and we've done a tempo detection. All right, so let's come over here. All right, so if we're kind of listening to this and we see that the tempo, like at this stage, before we close the tempo detection, I could say multiply by 2 or divide by 2. So right here is where you could do the multiply or divide by 2 if you're finding that the tempo is being detected at You know, so it's always a good idea, like as you do the tempo detection, just kind of listen to it, because it may be determined that, okay, I'm in cut time, or I'm playing this in 8/8 meter, you know. So here's where you could choose to multiply by 2 or divide by 2. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. All right, so we see Terry Gray says, "Hey Greg, I have the same plugin on slot 1 across multiple channels. Is there a way to have it open the next one and close the previous as I select the next channel?" I think. So let's see. I think we could probably make a macro to do that, Terry. So let's take a look. Let me just add a number of audio tracks here. Okay, and I'm going to put kind of the same plugin. So let's say, all right, I want to put like an EQ across all the channels. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so if I have this channel selected, let me just not, I'll just have one channel selected. All right, what you can do is, I'm just going to come over, so let's, like, and I'm sure you're using a controller, but let's come over to the MIDI remote. All right, and I'm just gonna, I'll just come to this page, and I'm just gonna say, okay, I want to open up, we'll come here, and then there is, there's a key command where we could just say open, close, insert editor, and we'll say, okay, we're going to open up insert editor 1 on the selected track. So let's say I have this channel selected. All right, and I'll just move all the knobs to the right here on channel 1. All right, so now when I go to select this channel, I could hit that button, and that will open up that particular, that first insert slot on the selected channel. So we can see audio 2, all my knobs are to the right. When I come here, I could just hit that. It won't automatically, you know, and if you want for it to open up that particular insert slot as we kind of move to the right, and let's say we want to close the plugin here. So let's say I want to close this plugin. So we have this open. So if we wanted to make a macro just to go to the next, so it may not automatically pop up that insert when it's selected, but if you want it to, let's go to our key commands and make a macro. Okay, so we'll say insert slot Okay, so we're going to come over here. Let's add that command. So we could close the original one. And I'm going to put that in twice. And then in the middle, we're just going to say we're going to navigate to the right. All right, so let's say I'm on audio 1 and I have that insert open. So let's say audio channel 1, all the knobs are to the left here. Okay, so I'm going to run this macro, which I could assign to my remote control, and this should close this plugin, go to the next channel, or let me navigate down, sorry, instead of to the right. We're going to navigate down in the track and then open up the next insert. So we run this macro. Now we see navigate. So if we run this macro again, and then we can make, let's copy this. All right. So I'm going to duplicate this macro, and we're going to say we're going to change the name here to previous track. Okay, so now instead of navigate down, I want to navigate up. All right, so we'll just all right, so now I could assign these macros to keys on my controller. So let's come here. I'm going to assign this knob, and we'll say let's get to okay, so we'll say previous. All right. Okay, and assign this function to that. So now let's say I have channel 1 open here. So I have this plugin open. So if I hit the next, or go next, then that's channel 2, that's channel 3. I hit the buttons here to go up. All right, so we go down. Let me just check my macro again. Oh, okay. Okay, so let's say we start here on channel 1, then we go down, down, up, up, and that will just, and if you, so that way you could open up and close the different editors right there, and and see the active ones. Let me know if that's workable for you, Terry. Okay, so we see from Woo Productions, says, I have an audio guitar solo track recording with different lanes. How can I quickly scroll between the lanes and listen to the recordings to piece together the best solo parts from a single solo into a single solo? All right, so just like we were showing kind of earlier with comping, we'll show it again. Revert this. So let's say I have multiple bass parts that were recorded, different passes, and we want to make, so we listen to it. All right, so every pass, we could open them up as lanes, and we could just see all of our different recordings here. Now we have a tool that looks like a hand. This is the comp tool. So it used to be kind of, and still is in many other programs, that when you need to select something, we would have to kind of cut, mute, events, and say, okay, I didn't want to hear this. I wanted to hear this one. So we would mute and then select different events. But now with the comp tool, what we could do is to select a different take altogether. Again, grab the hand, and then we can select our different recording passes here. So if I want to pick different sections, I could say just kind of drag over, and that would automatically select different portions and different takes. Let's say I didn't want to try a different one. Now, if I want to audition different takes, I could just come over here, hold down my Control or Command key. So maybe we want to try this one, so we'll just rewind. So now it's going to go from and even in the middle, I could just select a different. So then you could assemble the guitar solo that you may not be able to play in real life, just taking different snippets and combining them together. So once you have the recordings that are all kind of done on the same track, open the lanes, select the comp tool, and then find all the best parts. So it's a great tool for doing that. All right, so Paul Claridge says, thanks, Greg. I'll check my controllers tonight. I have 3 keyboards hooked up as controllers. Yeah. reading through comments. All right, you see Tiago joining from Brazil. Thanks for being online with us. All right, Woo Production says I'm selecting drum sounds in Groove Agent and put them on pads like Broke Country hi-hat closed, but that has only sound on one side. Can I change that to the center or pan, or center the pan in the middle? Okay, so let me just, so I'm not sure if you're doing it as a, so let's take a look. So we'll do it. So if you're putting it on pads, we assume that it's going to, all right, let me just search for Bro Country, see if I have that sound. All right, so see, it's Bro Country hi-hat closed. All right. Okay, so it's like, so I'm selecting drum sounds in Groove Agent and put them on the pads. All right, so it should be able to, like, once we come here, let me just load up a kit. Let me just see if we have the Bro Country kit. Okay, so all right, so we see that that is going to be panned. All right, so when we look at the sample itself, it's just the sample itself is only in the left channel. So that's why, so it's a stereo sample. Like here, if we go to the tom, that tom, the sample is set to only be in the stereo channel. So, but let's say if I want to come over, let's just put an F#1 here. So just kind of the root sample itself. Okay, so I'm going to render this as, let's render in place. All right, so let me just take a different approach with this, and I'll do an export audio mix down and do a mono. All right, so we'll come here, do an export audio mix down. We'll take just our Groove Agent SE2. We'll do a mono down mix. Let me include it in the project this time so I don't have to go hunting for it. All right, sorry about that. We will create an audio track with it. But so if we kind of render this as a mono, source. So let's here. I will just do it one more time here. I'm just going to increase the velocity here. So I'm going to, once again, render in place, and then we'll just split it. Okay, so then as we come over here, let's go to, we'll convert our tracks. All right, so now when I drag this file in, I could replace it. And then you can pan that however you want. It's just the original sample is only recorded. It's a stereo sample with the file only on one particular channel. So you could come over here, and now we could have just kind of the particular. I'll normalize it here real quick, just so we could hear it. Just bear with me a second. And now we could pan that wherever you want. Left. Right, because it's a mono sample. So it's just that when we look at this sample here, this one is going to be a stereo sample where everything is only on the right channel. So it's just, that's why it's doing that. All right. All right, so we see from Soren, just says, Greg, I don't get Snap Live input to play the scales on white keys. I've been testing for 30 minutes. I'm clueless as to what wrong I'm doing. The top left symbol, the pin, is always on. Does it matter? All right, so when we go to, let's say, your part here, like this is just a pitch visibility, and it's independent of the actual settings. So make sure that when you're doing it, that, depending on which method you're doing, if you're doing the scale assistant, we want to just come over here. So let's say we put it into B major, and we want to snap live input. Okay, let me unmute this. Okay, and I'll just put it onto quick step entry. We'll open up our virtual keyboard. All right, so now when I hit, that should be a D. All right, so all right, let me just see if try not step input. sorry, let me just jump back here. All right. So now we look at the pitches here. It looks like it's, let me just check my, all right, so it looks like it's doing it correctly. Let me try from my keyboard controller here. All right, so I'm just going to play C major chords. Now I'll play D minor chord. All right, so it looks like it's not snapping to the scale there. Let me try the chord track instead. Sorry about that. Let's take a quick look. Okay, so I'm going to come over, so let's try using, all right, so if I used a chord track here, let me try recording one more time. All right, so just record C major chord. All right, so here we did B major. So it still seems like it's, all right, let me try one other method here real quick. And try using the chords. All right, so we have the chords. So I'm going to say let's use the scales here on the chords. So now I'll just play C major scale. Everything on white keys. And then we can see, it looks like it's still, let me play around with this some more. So, I mean, I've done this many times. Let me just try. All right, let me say I'm going to follow the chord track on this. Try it one more time. So let's follow the scales. All right, so now let me try recording some more MIDI data. So that's automatically snapped to the particular scales. All right, so do some more C major chords here. Scales. Still kind of spelling it out like you were in. Let me play around with this a little bit, Soren, and see if I can get it figured out. I'm sure I'm probably one mouse click away from happiness, but it seems like it worked before, but maybe it's not doing it now. So I'll check it out and see if I could get a better answer for you on Friday. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so we see from Terry Greggs. Thanks, Greggs, about the inserts question, probably. All right, Una Memento just says, just asking to the group for questions. Says, what mic do you suggest for vocal recordings at home studio? Not expensive, suitable for semi-pro recordings. In the big studio, we have Neumann mics. Occasionally need to sing demo vocals at home. So, you know, I have kind of a variety of mics. Like I've gotten great results out of Rode mics, like inexpensive Rode mics. A lot of people like the Lewitt microphones. Kind of just off the side of my desk is maybe a little more expensive, but an Austrian Audio, I have an OC818, and that's kind of like maybe more in the line of kind of a new and improved, or I guess in England it would be an OC818, so which is kind of the people that had left the AKG factory. When AKG moved their factory from Vienna to, I think they moved to Asia, a lot of the employees had continued making the microphones and bought all the equipment for kind of pennies on a dollar. So those are kind of really interesting mics. I think they have kind of, you know, if you don't need as many polar options, you know, Audio Technica. I have friends that get like, you know, phenomenal recordings out of like an Audio Technica 4050 or 4047. I have an NTK Rode that I like quite a bit. But other people could share their suggestions of what mics, you know, work well for their particular uses. All right. All right, let me jump to a couple questions that were mailed in advance. Okay, our first question, let me just start a new project with this, just to get it started. And we'll get a loop. All right, so the first question we had was, good day, could you please discuss in more detail on, could you please discuss in more detail on one of the streams the issue of copying grooves from audio? Is there a Cubase Pro 13 Windows 10 features allow you to extract accurate groove template from audio files? Thank you in advance. So let's say I have this loop here and listen to it. This is going to have kind of a distinctive hip hop groove to it. So let's say if I wanted to put in like an instrument track, let's put in just maybe like a retro log here. And let's just come over here. Let's just make a quick bass sound. All right, and we wanted to take something that was maybe played in very straight. So let's come over and I'll just put in like some quick eighth notes. All right, so let's say we have maybe a bass line, and this bass line isn't. All right, so horrible hip hop bass line by Greg. All right, so, but what we want to do is to extract the groove of this. I'm going to open up my quantize panel, and then I'm just going to drag this file over. All right, so let's look at our quantize here. So now that we've dragged that particular groove over, I will now just come over here and let's apply that quantize preset to this file. So now, if this was but anything that was like straight, let's put on maybe a hi-hat, be less offensive. All right, so let me just. All right, so let's say. So we'll come here, we'll just paint in some hi-hats as 16th notes. All right, so now it's actually just using the, so you see that as I paint in, now it's actually that these particular notes, let me just make sure it's the right pitch here. So even when I just kind of painted the notes in, it's automatically applying the groove of that particular file. So, you know, we could now just kind of come right over and have, so just drag this right over. And now as we paint in the hi-hats, it's going to just match the same exact groove of the particular file there. So you could use that as a quantized preset. So if I say, okay, we want everything now to be quantized to 16th notes, I'll come here, let's select all, and we'll say quantize these to 16th notes, and then we could, you know, just come over, and as we paint notes in, so just drag this over, and that's automatically going to make your groove quantized template. All right, so we had another questions, follow up from last time about dragging patterns from Groove Agent to the particular track. And it sent a video, and it looked like you were doing everything correct, but I'll just kind of show it on my end. So if we go to our patterns here, and I drag it, then the patterns are automatically just kind of being placed as I would expect directly on the project, and it's not adding a MIDI track. But if I kind of come over here, it will add, you know, tracks below. It look like, you know, in the video you're doing kind of everything correct, but that's how you could drag the patterns from Groove Agent right onto the project window. All right, let me jump back, see if we have more live questions. You could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girls, it's just a question today. I saw at Cubase a new video. My question is now, does Halion exist a user sample library like Piano Book or third-party libraries like Contact Libraries? In Steinberg resources, I do not see so much libraries. So yeah, there's lots of libraries available. Like you could get, like the Etude is a great piano library if you want to kind of check it out. But if you want to, there's lots of different libraries. So let's, I'll just open up a quick project here so you could hear a little bit of, let's see if we have, so yeah, there's tons of third-party libraries that are available from that we sell on our marketplace. So let's say we have like the Grand here, but if I wanted to switch that out for, I'll just add an instrument. We could just go to Halion Sonic and Halion, you know, and as we have Halion and Halion Sonic can play back the same libraries. So there's way more users of those programs and other samplers. All right, so let's say we just wanted to go to like the Gospel Grand, and we will send this out to our Halion Sonic. And once you're here, you have different and here you could have kind of your different effects that you could employ as well. But if you wanted to see other libraries, we come over here, let's just say, so you could just say, okay, let's go to, all right, so these are different Groove Agent kits, Groove Agent styles, Pad Shop expansions, Halion, retro log expansions here. So let's, if you just wanted to go over to, you know, so there's so different bundles that you could get, but just kind of get an idea of different instruments that are available. And there's other companies that sell lots more. So that's just some of them that are available that Steinberg is able to sell on their particular marketplace. All right. We see Cornell Hegedus sending greetings from the Netherlands. Thanks for being online with us. All right. Okay. All right, you see Uno Mementos. It's the early morning tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Da Vinci Girl says, if I did put it out point, if I do Cubase Halion guitar effects library, I do not see return point of investment. So there's, Artifact guitar, M guitar, T guitar have all sold very well. So, all right, let's get to a couple of other questions that were mailed in.
Hello.
All right, bear with me just a second.
My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host.
All right. Okay, so you had a question. Why do two clips get selected when selecting a single part? How can I stop this behavior? Okay, so probably what is going on, we have two clips. If we notice that, like, we take these two events and we select one and the other is selected, and if we come over to here, let's say, okay, we have both of like multiple events here, so there's a good chance that they got grouped together. And we can see this little icon here. It almost looks like an inverted shared. So if you see that in the upper right hand corner, at that point we could just, those events will be grouped together for editing purposes. So if you always want to keep these proportional together, so as you move one, they will all move, etc. But now if we just come over, we can say, to undo that, so we hit Command or Control G to group the events, and then when we have them selected, hit Command or Control plus U for ungrouping. So now that they're ungrouped, they can all be moved independently. If we come over here and group them again, so if you see this little icon in the upper right hand corner, we can now just move those particular events together, and to get those to be ungrouped or unlinked, select them, and all the events that are grouped together will be selected simultaneously, and then you could hit Control or Command plus U to ungroup. All right, next question was mailed in is, how can I save presets to show different MIDI controller messages in the key editor? Okay, so let's say we have our key editor here for our piano voice. And like, let's say I want in general to see velocity. I want to see, maybe if I'm doing a lot of piano work, I want to see sustain pedal, continuous controller message 64. Maybe I want to see, if I do orchestral work, I want to see expression and modulation as my controllers. and to be able to call those as a preset. So let's say I'm here, or maybe we want to have multiple presets. So let's say I want to see my velocity and my sustain pedal. So when I'm editing pianos, these are the two controllers that I most want to see. I may not want to see velocity. I may not want to see like CC11 or CC1 because generally they don't do much for piano. So if I want to save this as a preset, I will come over here. Let's organize. We're going to click on Add Preset, and we're going to call it Piano. All right, so we could come over here and just say, okay, we want to only see, let's say I come right over here, we remove this lane. So let's say I'm only looking at velocity information here, and I quickly want to see my MIDI CCs for piano. So I would just kind of click right here and say, there's our piano. Now let's add in an expression. Let's do one for like a string library. So let's say we add a Halion Sonic, and let's say if we're working with an orchestral library. Okay, so here we're going to have like where modulation is going to be utilized for the sounds, for dynamics. And we could just kind of come over here. So when we go to sustain, we want to see our modulation data. We may want to see expression. We may want to see velocity, and maybe main volume. So let's come over here. And I'm going to say, okay, we want to see velocity. We want to also say, okay, let's see modulation. Let's add another controller lane. And let's say we want to see main volume. And let's say expression. So we could come over here. And again, we'll add and say CC11. All right. So as we do this, so we'll just say, okay, we're going to add a preset, and we'll say orchestral. So now if I wanted to switch to my piano MIDI CCs, or if I wanted to switch for my CC lanes that are set up for orchestral work, I could just click right there and navigate between all of the different CC options without having to set them up. Now, occasionally, you may also run into scenarios where if you open up the preset, you may not see all of the lanes if it's kind of in the lower zone. So let's say I switch to piano and then I switch to my orchestral. You may get this little message that says not enough space for controller lanes and presets. So if we make this taller, and then we reinstantiate the plugin, we could see all of our different MIDI CCs. And if you decrease the vertical height of the lower zone editor, you could see that these would slowly kind of get tucked away when they get to be too small to really make sense. So, and if we come over here, we could just say, okay, let's make and bring those back so we could see all of our different CCs and have them organized for different instruments. So if you're doing like all drums is going to be predominantly velocity. You may not need modulation, but you could use pitch bend, so you could have different presets for different instrument types, and you could save those particular controller lane presets as presets to recall as well. All right. Next question we had mailed in. Why are my VU meters seem to be at a lower volume than expected? Okay. So, and this is in supervision. So let's come over and I'll just do a brand new project here. All right, and we'll just add an audio track. I'm going to turn the control room volume down, and we're going to create kind of a, I'll just go to my inserts, and we'll put an oscillator, like a test tone on. So we're going to put a test generator on. I'm going to make it at -6 dB. All right, so we look at our mixer here. We can see that we have our mixer, we have our channel. The channel is going to our stereo output. So this is at -6 dB. When we look at our mixer here, we can see that we're at -6, -6. But if we have our supervision, let's say in our control room, and we switch this to the VU meter, we see, okay, you know, we could actually, if it's not kind of showing exactly what you expect, come over to like the little options, and often what you want to do is just set it, you could set different scales. So if you want to see VUDB or VUDB full scale, so you could just come over here and switch the different metering scales directly there. So that's what you could do to, if you're not seeing the meters that you expect from the levels in the VU meter. All right, so once again, you can send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, let's jump back to our questions here. All right. All right, reading through comments. All right, so you see from Anthony Clark, how to align vocal timing sample to drums that are not in the same BPM to fit the vocal into the drums. Is it free warp? And how can I lock the hit point to the grid when aligning the vocal? All right, so let's see if we can jump back to where we were. See if I closed it or not. All right, I'll just. All right, let me just remove this track. Okay, so let's say we have our drum loop here. All right, so let's say we'll just repeat this a couple times here. All right, and now we want to jump to like a vocal sample.
Every part of me, so high I'm lifted. It's gotta be love.
Okay, so we'll just, all right, so let's say we have kind of this going on, so say.
So high I'm lifted. It's gotta be love. This is how you got me crazy, love.
All right, just.
Crazy, crazy, crazy.
Okay, so let's say we have kind of a quick vocal and a beat.
lifted. It's gotta be love.
All right, so now what I've done is each of these tracks are in musical mode to start with. So when we drag them like from Media Bay, we could just have, if we have this little icon on, this will automatically kind of speed up and slow down to match the tempo. So let's say I want to go from 120 to 108.
You got me crazy, love.
Now let's say you want to adjust kind of the timing of different parts. So if you want to align the vocal timing, what you could do is just come over here and, if you go to the free warp tool. So when you go to the warp tool, you could actually see different modes. So we can say, okay, I want to go to the free warp tool here, and and when you do this, often you want to make sure that you have, so if I wanted this to occur like this, I could, we just come here. I'm going to put my warp marker here. And then when I have the free warp tool active, I could come right over here. We go to the left and we see that warp marker turns white. Then I could just have that automatically move and kind of warp to the next marker. So as we do this, so we could just come over here and reposition the timing. So we say, okay, I want this to be right on the downbeat there of measure 8 to beat 3. So as we do this, so you could kind of use free warp just to kind of drag stuff around, but it always makes sense to kind of come over and put these like a warp marker before and after. So because then we could kind of keep that particular timing and just kind of change that particular value there. So let me know if that helps with your scenario, Anthony. All right, we have Jugurtha Studio saying hello. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl ask, can Steinberg and Cubase do some videos around the topic of ROI to use Steinberg products? Will be for more users than me. Really an interesting topic. So, I mean, generally a lot of those are kind of more business to business discussions. So if you reach out to to the Steinberg Instruments team, I think if you want to become like a partner, you could, let's see if we want to be like a Halion partner program, I think. So if you, let's see if there's partner program. All right. All right, so you can see Chris St. Aubin, he's done his own libraries. Yeah, so if you come over here, you can see the Halion Partner Program. So if you want to let's see if it's more the but if you reach out to the Halion reach out to Steinberg and they could put you in touch with the Halion team, so you could check out some of the wonderful instruments. Danny Lux comes to mind as a great example. Danny is probably one of the most prolific TV composers. I think he has like 4,000 broadcast hours. Like he's done Grey's Anatomy since, for 20 years. tons of other shows. And, you know, when you look, Danny has like 3 instruments that he uses in lots of his projects. So he kind of made an instrument for his own personal use in Halion, and now he's selling it and doing really well with it. So check out like the, you know, the Danny Lux instruments, and we'll just show you some of those. Like, so let me just. And they were just on sale. So if you come over to like the Wave and Polycreate, so check out you know, Online Music Foundry. Gary Gibbons, his stuff is amazing for a pad shop. So there's lots of people that are doing it and making good money. So let's say if we just want to go to instruments, we'll take a look. Let me just find the just look under instruments. But yeah, the Danny Lux signature bundle. You know, check out this. These are just really amazing instruments, and these are, you know, like, this is such a great story of Danny. He was a long time Cubase user and a big fan of Halion, and he just started making his own sounds, and then now he's selling them as, you know, so you could just simply get access to the sounds that he's using in, you know, major television shows and stuff. So research that. But I don't think that they will have, like, you know, like more of a business to consumer model video kind of showcasing that. But if you want to reach out, I could get you in touch with the right people. All right, we see Graham Witchers bought the new Hot Mess release that was done on Friday. Agartha Book 1. All right. Thanks for doing that, Graham, and supporting musicians. All right, Miller Brown says Windows 10, Cubase Pro 14. I have a Halion Symphonic Orchestra installed, 6.64 gigs, and I show an update 13.51M that won't go away even after install. Any idea what's up? Thanks. All right, it says I show update to 13.51 megabytes. That won't go away. All right, so let me just go to the download assistant, take a look. Okay, so let's just look at all right, so when I see the Halion Symphonic Orchestra, we just see the 6.64 gigabytes here, and then we can see, so I'm not sure, let's take a look if we do it as kind of a separate product here. So here in the downloads, if it's for Halion Symphonic Orchestra, you know, you see the 6.64 gig, and if you didn't have the Halion Sonic as the player. You can download that separately. So maybe Millard, if you just let me know if it's the update for the Halion Symphonic Orchestra. It says update, and then that won't go away even after install. Any idea? So, if it's, let me know where the file is. If it's in your downloads folder, like in your Steinberg downloads folder, if you can let me know where it is and what the name of the file is, that'd be helpful. Okay. All right, so we see from Anthony Clark says, try to be patient when not getting the best examples by any means. Is a warp marker could be placed in the air only. I thought you meant that the warp marker, if it's possible to be snapped to the highest attack of the vocal, and how if I get the marker lock there and snap it to the grid while moving the marker. All right, so if you want it to be kind of at the highest point of the vocal, so we'll come here. So let's just, if we just double click here, we could just say, all right, so anytime that we have, let's go to hit points here. So I'll just say, let's edit the hit points of the particular file. So we can say, okay, these are my hit points. We could adjust our threshold and our intensity. So now I have those, and now I could just simply come over here. We'll see this little crate, and we could just choose to create warp markers. So now when I have my warp, and if I want to snap this to the grid, we just have our, we'll say use quantize, and now we can just automatically snap that directly to the grid just by doing that. Or you could choose to, okay, I just want to quantize that event, and you see when I hit Q, all those events will kind of snap to the grid location. So let me know if that's kind of more what you're looking for. Okay, so we see from Enzo Mignoga, or Mignog, it says, I'm Enzo from Italy, amazing video, even if I don't understand very well your language. Sorry, I wish I could speak Italian. I studied a little bit of Spanish, but it's probably not so helpful. All right, so we see Millard Brown. It says, show an update, 13.51 megabytes. It won't go away even after install. Any idea? So we see the updates. Millard just says updates red dot. So is it in the Steinberg, like the download assistant that you're seeing it in, Millard? So let's see if we come over here. So usually if you have particular, so say if I come over here to updates, you can see my VST sound. So here, let's see if I see one of them. So let's go to applications. I don't see. So here I could install the updates to these applications. So like, let's say if I want to come here and install Backbone, so the latest version of Backbone, I'll do that here. All right, we see Miller Brown says download assistant. I'll see what happens as soon as we finish the install, what indication we have. Okay, so once we see this, we see install again. That means that we can install it again, but it's already been installed. So let's see if we sign out of, I go to my products, let's go to updates, and let's see if I exit out here, and let's go to the Steinberg download assistant. Okay, let's see, we go here. Okay, so you see updates, and let's take a look. So you see that now that I installed Backbone, that it's doesn't show up here under updates. I mean, if you want to email me a screenshot, Millard, you could send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to take a quick look at it. All right, so we see Shine TV Ghana. It just says, do you have a music course? So generally here we are, just kind of focusing more on Cubase. Sometimes we will discuss musical concepts, but my job, is really just kind of help people with Cubase, and sometimes we may have a lot of musical context, but I don't have a dedicated music course. I mean, I did traditional kind of music degree in college and all that fun stuff. All right, so we see Online Music Foundry on. It's great to see. I guess it's Gary Gibbons. So he was a sound designer, does a lot of stuff for Steinberg Instruments. If it's Gary, great to have you on. So we see from Miller Brown says under VST Sounds, it looks like it installs. I get a check mark, but if I rerun the assistant, it comes back install, not install again. So, see if the sounds are loading up, you're probably okay. But let me know if you think that the sounds aren't kind of popping up as expected. You see Miller just says he will email. Thanks very much. All right, so we see Anthony Clark says, whatever, the marker itself can follow the vocal hit point and stretch it to the grid. I think we don't have it yet. I'm just going to keep watching. Never mind. So if we come here, I'm stretching the vocal here, and then we could have that automatically snap to the grid right here as we do that. So you see that it'll just kind of pause as it gets right to the beat. But here we're just taking the vocal and stretching it. And then having it lock to the grid. So, so I think that's doing what you want to do. So that is the marker itself can't follow the vocal hit point. So, you can, again, create the markers. If you go to your audio menu, you could just say create warp markers from hit points and then just kind of drag it as needed. All right. Yeah, everyone check out the link to Online Music Foundry stuff. He does amazing pad shop, retrolog, all sorts of great sounds. All right, we'll see if there's other questions that kind of pop in. Yeah, everyone please check out Gary's tutorials, and it just makes, like, every sound he has is just amazing. So I have so much respect for Gary and his work. All right, we'll see if other questions kind of pop in. Let me know, Anthony Clark, if that's kind of what you were expecting it to do, what you wanted to do with the stretching. All right, so we'll see if there's other questions that pop in. Thank everyone for the great questions, and if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button. see, just kind of check, see if I'm not missing anything over here. All right, we'll give it another minute or so, see if more questions sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up just a little bit early. It's my son's first day of school today, so I get to go up and see how he liked it. First day at a new school. All right. All right. See kind words from Jim Purcell, just saying thanks. All right, question from Audiophonics. Hi, just wondering if you drop in a loop and duplicate it many times, what is the best way to reverse just one of them so you could have perhaps 3 forward, 1 reverse sample loops? Thanks. All right, so there is like just a quick preference to do this. So let's say I have this loop here just copied a whole bunch of times and I want to reverse the third one. All right, so generally what's happening, you know, if most people's default behavior is, since it's the same audio file that's being played multiple times, that if we reverse this, that all of the files reverse, because it's not just the event is triggering the audio file, and if we reverse the audio file, that will often just simply reverse all of them. So if we come over here, so let's say, and I probably have this set up, so I'm going to go to reverse the third instance of the loop there, and we notice that reversed automatically. So we play this, it's automatically, that one is reversed. Now why it kind of behaves that way, you get a preference for this. If you go to settings, to editing, to audio, and what this is a shared clip. So you say on processing shared clips, you could just say replace audio in project. So as soon as we have that set, you know, so if we undo this, so usually it's going to give you a preference. So we could just say open options dialog. All right, so if I come over here and I process this file, and that file is being used multiple times, so usually we get this and it says, you know, this project contains files that use the same audio file, and you say, okay, I want to continue. And if you continue, now every loop is reversed. And what a lot of people end up doing is just to come over here. So say we go to reverse the third one, and you say, please don't show me this again. And you say, all right, so when you do that, now again, they're all, you know, so, and then once you want that to be applied to just a particular audio file, you say editing audio, and on processing share clips, just choose create new version. And then I could say every third instance, I want this one, and you know, I want this file to be reversed, but none of the others. So we could now just come over here, processes, reverse, and now these two files will play in normal direction. This one will be reversed because it created a new version instead of processing and changing the same audio that's referenced. And now we're right back to where we were. So that's how you could do it. So again, if it's happening to you, settings or preferences, under editing audio, create new version under on processing shared clips. All right. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says, hey, Greg sent you some tunes. Hope you get a chance to check them out. Let me know if you want any of the Cubase 14 files, and see you Friday. So thanks for doing that. All right, so we see from Audiophonics, just says, thanks, Greg. They're all getting reversed for me. Didn't know about that preference option. So yeah, it's one of those windows that you say, don't show me again, and then people can't find it kind of in the preferences. All right, so we see Gary just saying, great info. Thanks, Greg. All right, we'll give it another minute, see if there's other questions that sneak in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. We will we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And we usually go for 4 hours or until we run out of questions. And if you want to look and search for topics been covered in previous live streams, you could always go to cubaseindex.com. We'll give it another 30 seconds, see if there's more questions. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. John Costigan saying thanks. All right, looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for being on the live stream and hope that everyone's learned new tips and tricks and so you can work better with your Cubase. With that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions again, and everyone please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Take care.